Ladies and gentlemen, Binal of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Binal of America Audio with your host, Tim Binal.
Hello out there, my friends. This is Tim Binal of BinalofAmerica.com with another edition of BOAA Audio Season 4. This week here on the program, we have another dual guest interview as we welcome Andrew Barnes and Paul Tate, creators of the film Your Worst Nightmare, which details the sleep paralysis and supernatural assault phenomena. In short, these two connected events are first sleep paralysis. I think most folks know what that is. And then a percentage of the people who have experienced sleep paralysis say they're being assaulted by some kind of supernatural entity. I'm sure many folks have heard some of these stories in the past. We're going to hear a lot more about these alleged assaults on the program. Here in this lengthy 2-hour interview with both Andrew and Paul, we're going to be talking about just what these incidents of sleep paralysis and supernatural assault are, how the first seems to lead to the other, what experiencers of the phenomenon say happen when they are attacked, has anyone tried to communicate with the attacking entities, what proof do we have that these events are real, what the clergy says about it, how the phenomenon has been erased from the Western world, shadow entities, OBEs, the Cambodian connection, the God helmet, and tons more. And for the first time ever, we're including a little bit of technical difficulties at the end of the interview. I found it kind of amusing listening to it back again. Paul and Andrew found it kind of spooky, so you may find it amusing or you may find it spooky. Usually we take these sort of things out of the program, but I kind of liked it and figured I'd include it in there. Anyway, it's a very fun interview. I really enjoyed talking to both Andrew and Paul. Great guys. We had a lot of laughs in the interview and in the period before we even started taping. Within the first 5 to 10 minutes of our conversation before the show even started, I had a feeling I was going to like these guys. They're definitely the kind of folks you want to sit down, have a couple of beers with, and talk about all the various paranormal elements. But here tonight, of course, we're going to be focusing on sleep paralysis and the supernatural assault phenomenon, all of which is chronicled in their outstanding film, Your Worst Nightmare. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Andrew Barnes and Paul Tate, I'm going to give you a little bit of an abbreviated bio for both of these folks. Full-length bio on the website, but I didn't want to read 6 whole paragraphs here and have folks just smack down on the fast-forward button to get to the interview. So we'll just do a shorter version of the official bios for Andrew and Paul. Andrew Barnes is from northern Maine and currently lives in Maine's western mountains. Growing up in a small rural town in a family of lawyers, he developed a love of nature, athletics, law, and communication. Andrew has lived in France, Germany, Poland, Italy, and Russia, and is fluent in French and German. He loves language and culture and has been greatly inspired by the storytellers he has met while traveling. His interest in filmmaking has been lifelong and is inspired by the truth that each individual has a compelling story and a unique voice in the world. His Soul Smack production team has many films in the works, both documentary and non-documentary, in addition to their recent film, Your Worst Nightmare, Supernatural Assault. And now the Paul Tate bio. Paul Tate has been reading, observing, and researching the paranormal and supernatural since his early childhood. His fascination with the unknown began as far back as 1978 and stems from the strange and sometimes frightening experiences he had as a young boy living in his native country of England. These ghostly encounters provided Paul with the desire to learn more about the spirit world and has since led him on a lifelong journey of discovery and enlightenment within the unknown. An accomplished and professional videographer, Paul has since relocated to New England. His love of filmmaking and the paranormal finally merged in 2007 after a chance meeting with Andrew Barnes. The duo has subsequently formed the Soul Smack production team responsible for the film Your Worst Nightmare, Supernatural Assault. You can find out more from Andrew and Paul at the website www.soulsmack.com, SOULSMACK.com. There you can check out trailers for the film Your Worst Nightmare, and we've also embedded a trailer for the film on the audio page where you grab this interview from, so you definitely want to check that out at BOA. Without any further ado, let's rock and roll. This interview was recorded on March 6th, 2009. Andrew Barnes and Paul Tate talking about their film Your Worst Nightmare, Supernatural Assault, on BOA Audio, Season 4. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Banal of America Audio. We are doing another double guest interview here, so it's going to be a little freewheeling. Our guests are Andrew Barnes and Paul Tate. They are the men behind the amazing film Your Worst Nightmare, Supernatural Assault. This is an outstanding DVD that just came out in February. I really enjoyed it quite a bit. It's all about sleep paralysis and supernatural assault. Another one of those subjects that it is kind of popular nowadays, it seems, or it's been growing in popularity for the last few years, but it's also way on the peripheral of the esoteric world. So I'm looking forward to talking to them. I've already had a little pre-show discussion with them. They sound like great guys, and I have a feeling this is going to be a lot of fun and a very enlightening conversation. Welcome to the show, Andrew, and welcome to the show, Paul.
Hi, Tim. How are you doing?
Oh, look at that. It's already insanity here on the program.
You didn't plan that unison talk.
Yeah, right. Anyway, well, it's good to have you here, Paul. It's good to have you here, Andrew. Of course, I should say folks can find out more about the film at soulsmack.com. That's your website. And again, the title of the film is Your Worst Nightmare, Supernatural Assault. Little subtitle here, Real People, Real Stories, Real Terror. Very good movie, outstanding piece of filmmaking. I've watched a lot of esoteric movies, and most of them are crap. So I got to tip my hat to you guys on putting together a very well-made piece of work here with Your Worst Nightmare.
Thank you.
There you go,
yes,
Paul.
We didn't want to interrupt you while you were making those wonderful comments.
We could actually sit here all night, and you could just roll on with those comments.
Oh, well, you know, I try my best. Well, I guess let's start out with, you know, the bio, the background. Who is Andrew Barnes? Who is Paul Tate? You know, how did you guys gravitate towards the esoteric? And, you know, specifically sleep paralysis. How did you guys end up deciding to tackle this first as your first big project here with Soul Smack? And I guess we'll turn it over here first to Andrew to answer the bio background question, and then we'll give you a chance, Paul.
Well, Tim, it's very interesting. Paul and I separately had encounters and experiences with sleep paralysis before we met and teamed up to produce a movie. My brother had experienced sleep paralysis with a frightening presence, or as we're calling it, supernatural assault. And I personally met Dr. David Hufford in 1984, the year that he published his book, The Terror That Comes in the Night, which, quite frankly, is a tremendously valuable case study, and I recommend it for anyone to read. And years went by. I always had that in the back of my mind, and when I met Paul, I found out that, well, I'll let him tell you about his experiences, but we found out we need to get this together and get this out to the people and stop some of the misunderstandings about it.
Okay. Paul?
Well, my journey with sleep paralysis began way back in 1992. I was 22 years old, and I had my first experience of sleep paralysis, and at that time, really, I didn't know anything about sleep paralysis. I didn't even know it existed. So when I had it, it totally scared the life out of me. I mean, I didn't know what it was, and it wasn't until years after that experience. I saw a documentary once, and it was on, I believe it was on BBC in England, and they were talking about this phenomenon called sleep paralysis, and that was years later. And that was the first time I ever learned what could have possibly happened to me when I was 22 years old. I've always had a keen interest in the paranormal, and this goes back to my early childhood. I had some experiences that I just couldn't really explain, and I wanted to find out more about the paranormal. So that's where my journeys began into this. And then I met Andrew Barnes and we began speaking about, we both found out we were both interested in filmmaking, and we began speaking about certain topics. And sleep, I don't know how it came up. Sleep paralysis just came up between us, and we both encountered it and decided to embark on this film, which was we felt would be a service to the public to produce a documentary that would explain away what could possibly be happening for many people who had never had the opportunity to find information on this subject. So that's pretty much where my background on this comes from.
So you guys have both experienced this sleep paralysis phenomenon. That's interesting. For the folks who are really living under a rock or unfamiliar with what exactly we're talking about, I guess give us a little definition of sleep paralysis so we can bring them up to speed on what it is we're going to be discussing here tonight on the show.
I think that it's very important to separate sleep paralysis from the topic of the movie. Supernatural assault is really where we did most of our research. The sleep paralysis is like the bottom step. You have to have sleep paralysis in order to experience supernatural assault. So for a quick definition, when you have sleep paralysis, and I can explain what makes it happen, you find yourself awake and unable to move. You're paralyzed completely. You can't speak. You can generally move your eyes, look around, and it's a little disconcerting, and it's usually very short-lived. And the reason it happens is that your brain doesn't allow your motor nerves to activate your muscles, and that's very helpful when you sleep because you don't want to get up and run around when you're dreaming. So that's a very simple physiological experience. It's more likely to happen if you are tired, if you're stressed, if you're unhealthy. So you want to avoid those things. But if sleep paralysis lasts any length of time, if it lasts more than 45 seconds to a minute, very strange, disconcerting things happen to a huge percentage of the population worldwide. And that's where we centered our research.
There you go. Yeah, it's important to note, like we said, there's sleep paralysis, and that's kind of like a standalone thing, and then that can lead to supernatural assault. That's what you're trying to say?
It's almost as if sleep paralysis makes you vulnerable to everything else that happens.
Yeah, there are there are two aspects to it, and one is the box standard sleep paralysis that people experience, and then there is 80% of those people who experience sleep paralysis go on to experience this strange phenomena, which includes some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about later. That can be quite terrifying for those who experience it.
Now, where do you get the number 80%? I'm just wondering.
Well, the research we've done, and also when we spoke to Dr. David Hufford, he's probably interviewed the most people because he's been researching this for over 30 years. So he's interviewed thousands of people about sleep paralysis encounters that they've had, and his figure really was 80% he gave us, and some of the other research we've done points to that sort of figure as well. So we pretty much use that as a base figure when we're talking about the amount of people that experience the stranger side of sleep paralysis.
Tim, interestingly enough, before I actually met Dr. Hufford, the years of high school and college, after I had attended his conference, and before I had actually done any serious research, this was kind of a joke conversation that a person would have in college among friends. And, he gave all these percentages of people who'd had supernatural assault. And what I used to do in college was whenever I was with a group of people at night or at a party or in a scary situation, I would say, hey, has anyone ever woken up and been unable to move? And inevitably, there are several people in the group who say, yeah, I've never told anybody about it because I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy. But now that we've done this formal research, it's amazing, and that's why we interviewed it the way we did, because these people come right into your living room and tell you their story.
Absolutely. Some of the people in the film are just amazing folks, especially that Heather. She's quite a character.
You noticed Heather?
Oh, I did notice Heather. She's delightful. We kind of established that sleep paralysis is the base of what's going on here, and then it sort of leads into the supernatural assault. So I guess tell us more about the supernatural assault part of the story here, and spell it out a little bit and describe what these various people who are featured in the film and other people who around the world who've had the same experience, what they report and what they've had happen to them during these supernatural assault episodes.
I'll start out, Tim, and talk about the basic sort of the series of things that happens, and then I'll pass it over to Paul because his experience is quite different from mine. But my experience of sleep paralysis with frightening presence is as a remote viewer, as a remote observer. I witnessed this creature come, and a creature it was to me, come and attempt to assault a girlfriend that I had known in college. And this happened on 2 occasions. And afterwards, we both compared notes. And it was astounding that a person who was not being assaulted could be aware of the assault. But basically, here's a snapshot of supernatural assault. You're suddenly awake. You don't wake up slowly. You wake up immediately. And you can't move, can't talk. You can move your eyes and look around, but you feel usually a presence in the room. And you often hear something coming towards you. You hear footsteps in the hallway. You see the door open. Something comes into the room. It's a black mass, or it's a small creature at times. Now, these are all descriptions from people that are repetitive world over. The creature comes to you intending to do you harm, and it crawls up on the bed. You'll feel the bed sinking down. The creature will hover over your bed, over you. Sometimes it will actually crawl onto you and sit and look at you, and in very rare occasions, there's a very clear description of eyes and a menacing look. And then this creature simply takes your energy and frightens you terribly, and you feel like you can't breathe. You feel like you're being choked. And then when you finally succeed in moving, it's over. You're still afraid, but none of the scary things are happening anymore, and you can move. You get up and it's over. And Paul can lead you into his personal experience of it.
As Andrew pointed out, you wake up, you know, your eyes can move, but you're paralyzed, and you feel most times this tremendous presence in the room. Often this feeling is accompanied by a pressure, a feeling like you're being pressed down into the bed. Now, this is what I actually experienced myself. I'll give you a brief description of my own personal experience. The first time it happened to me is I woke up, and I always sleep face down anyway, which is unusual to have sleep paralysis. It's quite important to point out. Usually it occurs when you sleep on your back. But I was sleeping face down, and I woke up one morning, and I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. And I thought, you know, at that moment that it was just one of those sleep things. You know, I'd slept weird, and my body had, you know, when you sleep on your arm, sometimes you wake up and it's dead.
Yeah.
I thought something like that had happened to me, so I didn't panic. It wasn't until I felt this tremendous pressure pushing me down, face down into the bed, and I had my head turned sideways so I could still breathe, but the pressure was immense, and it almost felt like I was going to be pushed through the bed. That's how heavy it was. I also then heard whispering sounds behind my ears. It sounded like multiple voices, all whispering, and the only way, I mean, I could do it for you so you could hear, but it was like, you know, all these whispering voices, and it was absolutely terrifying because at that point I'd never heard of sleep paralysis. Like I said, I didn't know what it was, and you can imagine what I must have thought. It felt like something was attacking me, and I was about to die. I didn't know what the hell to make of it. So that's a typical experience. Now, when people see these shadow creatures that come into their rooms, and it's, you know, this is interesting because these shadow creatures, the number of them, and if anyone out there wants to research these shadow beings, just go to Google, type in shadow men, shadow creatures, jinn, which is spelled DJINN, and you'll see that these are increasing in numbers. These sightings, these encounters with shadow beings are increasing in numbers, and they have been consistently increasing over the years. So they see this shadow form, and this is the malevolent presence that comes in and terrifies, scares half these people almost, half to death. But, I will say at this point that I don't know of anyone at this, that's died of sleep paralysis, but these beings are menacing. And they crawl up on people. We even had one girl in the documentary who we had to black out her face, claim that one of these beings actually sexually assaulted her, and it was real as real can be for her. So it can be quite terrifying.
Yeah, it seemed like the people who were featured in the film, they were pretty shook up about what happened to them.
They definitely were shook up, and some of them, had a hard emotional time with it. They broke down crying on a couple of occasions. It was hard for them to deliver what they experienced to us. But, at the end of the day, I'm glad they did it, and so are they, because they spoke about it, and we followed up with them, and it actually helped them to be able to talk to people about what they experienced.
Yeah.
So it alleviates some of the, I wouldn't call it built-up stress. I don't know what you'd call it. It helps to alleviate some of the
trauma.
Stigma. The trauma. That's the word. The trauma that they've been experiencing for these years, and carrying that silently with them every day. So it definitely helps.
And now to jump a little bit on what Andrew said about how when he was in college, a lot of people wouldn't, they'd say, oh, this happened to me, but I didn't want to tell anyone because I was crazy. How did you even find the people to feature in the film, to talk about their experiences and stuff like that? Was it hard to coax them to go on film and talk about this, or was it even hard to find them, or were you already sort of in the community of sleep paralysis people, so it wasn't that hard?
No, we created this community, at least the one around us, in the work on this film, and I believe we have a bit of a knack with interviewing, which really helped. These were very scary interviews for people to go through, and we were able to coax them through the interview process and shed a lot of light onto things that none of our subjects had ever spoken about before. There's a terrible stigma in Western culture, and it really is only in Western culture, about ghosts and the paranormal. And it comes from, we all know this, it comes from science, and it comes from religion, and it comes from the psychological profession, primarily the psychological and psychiatrical professions, because even if we've never heard it said to us directly, we all know that if we tell a psychiatrist or a psychologist that we didn't dream that there was a ghost in the room, we really saw this creature. If someone says, I was wide awake, we know that that's a bad thing to say in the United States and in Europe.
Yeah.
And indeed, about 50% currently of psychiatrists in studies that were done misdiagnose supernatural assault as psychosis. It's a terrible thing that goes on your record. People are making very rational conclusions. They're awake. They know they're awake. They can see the clock. They can see their room. They can see their roommate sleeping. And then they have this horrible attack. It's extremely traumatic for them. And when they say that they're awake, that is the trigger. If you say you're awake, you say it was real, then you'll be termed psychotic. And I have, since the movie has come out, I've been able to verify exactly how psychiatrists tend to deal with it. That's certainly, not a generalization that we can make, for everyone. But they generally say that the victim had a psychotic event with other descriptors not otherwise specified. And the not otherwise specified folder is filled with people saying the exact same thing happened to them. And those folders ought to be opened up and compared.
Yeah. Just to sort of jump on what Paul was saying here, too, about the jinn and how it seems like the sightings are increasing. It does seem like there's a bit of a and I mentioned this on our forum at the Banal of America forum, that there does seem to be like a jinn renaissance going on right now, where a lot of people seem to be re-recognizing or rediscovering the jinn stories and the jinn theories and reapplying them now to contemporary paranormal type events, abductions, and now this supernatural assault and stuff like that. Have you noticed the same thing, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I've been all over the internet as well, scouring and gleaming information, and I have found that everybody has come to the same conclusion that these number of shadow being sightings are on the increase. They're on the up. And there's a few different forms of shadow creatures that are appearing. You've got the box standard shadow man, which looks like a regular guy, but formless. I mean, no features. You can't see features. You just see a silhouette shadow. And then there's what they term the Hat Man. This guy wears it's like a shadow form again, but wearing a brim hat. It's like almost like not Mexican hat. I don't know.
Fedora?
Yes, they would wear them in the olden days. And then you've got people see shadow pets, shadow creatures like, small animals that they can't quite make out their form, but they see them, and it's quite interesting. You say, why the shadow? Why are they seeing shadows as silhouettes? And there's something quite amazing that we discovered during the filming and the research we've done is that you've probably been investigating this sort of paranormal stuff yourself for years, and everything around us, everything that we see, that we hear, that we can touch, is a vibrational form. It's everything is a vibration. Even light, color is even color is a vibrational frequency. Everything in the universe is held together by vibration. Now, there's what we call the electromagnetic spectrum, which goes all the way from radio wave to gamma wave. And then, right in the center of this huge spectrum of electromagnetic waves, we've got what we call the visible light spectrum, is the spectrum that we can see that allows us to perceive the dimensional realm that we exist in. Anything outside of that, the UV, the infrared, the radio, the gamma, with our human perception, we can't perceive it. So if anything was to exist or coexist with us on this planet or in this dimension with us on another frequency that was outside our range, we wouldn't be able to perceive it. But if it stood in front of you, it really wouldn't be invisible. It would just block out the light that you could see and reflect light that you couldn't. And it would appear just like a black shadow. And that is exactly what people are reporting worldwide, and they're reporting it in increasing numbers. And it's almost like this whole shifting consciousness, this whole awareness that's happening to everybody. This could explain why they're able to perceive. Maybe momentarily something's happening within them that's allowing them to perceive what's standing in front of them. Or momentarily whatever's standing in front of them may be shifting down into our field or our frequency of perception, allowing us to momentarily have a glimpse of what's standing there. So it's pretty interesting that these jinn go back way back in history. They've been with us all the time. It's just that now they're being reported in mass numbers.
Yeah. It's like people all of a sudden are hearing about the jinn, and they're realizing that the jinn are fulfilling a lot of the same descriptions of things that we've attached to other entities in the last few years.
Yeah, in a lot of famous literary works, there are descriptions, classic descriptions of sleep paralysis experiences with a supernatural presence. Shakespeare and many other people have written about these, and anyone who's had the experience immediately recognizes it when they start reading about it. And the rest of us, we kind of pass it off as a little ghost story there.
Well, I've never experienced any of this stuff, so
I hope you never do.
Well, don't say that. That's just mean. That's just cruel. I would like to. That's fine with me,
I don't know, Tim, I don't know if we mentioned it because I don't remember mentioning this, but the numbers that have been reported worldwide to experience sleep paralysis itself is 1 in 5 people worldwide. All cultures, all races will experience sleep paralysis at one point in their life. And then 80% of that 1 in 5 go on to experience the strange phenomena.
And to sort of break off topic a little bit here and just look at the paranormal world as a whole, in a sense, it seems like when you hear the word sleep paralysis, you immediately attach that to the whole abduction thing and how the abduction debunkers use sleep paralysis as like a catch-all thing to disprove abduction and stuff like that. And it does seem like sleep paralysis, with the exception of your fine film, which is sort of like giving it a fresh take and a fair shake, if you will. It seems like to some people in the paranormal world, sleep paralysis is so tied in with the debunking of abductions that it's quickly like poo-pooed and dismissed, and they don't realize that there's a lot more to sleep paralysis than they realize. What do you think of that?
Tim, no one has been able to explain away any of the more bizarre aspects of sleep paralysis. To your listeners right now, those who've had sleep paralysis and have been attacked and have never spoken about it, they're saying to their boyfriends and their girlfriends and their children and their spouses, they're saying, see, that's exactly what happened to me. That's what I'm talking about. The problem is the world of science says that it's not real because it can't be real. To quote David Hufford, Dr. David Hufford says, yes, people often make assumptions. However, it takes scientists usually to make huge assumptions. And, the assumption that this can't be supernatural, that assumption doesn't hold water when, if you're in a group of 10 people, and, 2 or 3 of them raise their hand and say, hey, this happened to me, and it was real. That's why Dr. Hufford's book has lasted. It's an incredibly detailed work. It has a lot of, it has hundreds of interviews with people who've had the same thing, and he doesn't say that it's supernatural. He says, if you don't, it's right in the film. It's an amazing quote. He says, if you don't believe in the supernatural explanation, then tell me the other explanation. People spend all their time saying, yeah, it's not real. And, they also say, yeah, abduction's not real. But the only reason they say it is because it can't be real. And on the topic of abduction, a really fascinating thing, the similarities between sleep paralysis and these attacks and the abduction stories is huge. And please, indie filmmakers out there needs to be many, many more films on this topic. It is a ripe area for research and for filming, and the world needs to be made aware. One of the biggest issues in our film is that people are misdiagnosed, improperly misdiagnosed, and then given medication for something which is a normal human experience. Well, what if abductions really are real and people aren't crazy? That some filmmaker ought to come through and not say, wow, this is a sensational story, can you believe that? They should simply say, wow, look, no one can disprove this at all. And I pass it over to Paul. He's got a lot to say on abduction, and it's all very credible, and we really ought to pay attention.
And the thing is, Tim, as far as the alien abduction and even the shadow beings attacking people, science really has a problem with this because it can't measure it, it can't prove it, and it just doesn't know what it is. And obviously, I've been doing a lot of research for a lot of years, and I know there are certain people out there who do know what's going on. And usually these guys who undertake these, they call them black ops, or they conduct their experiments behind closed doors, and they seem to be more enlightened than most of the scientists out there. They know full well what's going on, but they're keeping it from mainstream science, and mainstream science is only trying to make up the puzzle out of the pieces they have, and they can't do it. So as far as these abductions go, who's to say that these are not real? I've seen stuff out there, and there's a tremendous a guy out there. I think everybody should go and check him out, David Wilcock. This guy is talking up a storm about the possibilities that are existing or coexisting with us, and we should listen to everybody's point of view rather than just poo-poo stuff and say it can't be. Listen to the points of view and then do your own research. And if you find out that it is absolute nonsense, then discard it. But you will start to find too many, I wouldn't say coincidences because there's no such thing as a coincidence, but you'll find too many similarities, too many correlations that you just can't ignore it. You can't dismiss this. And as far as alien abductions go, I've heard stories that would blow people's minds about aliens and apparent entities that exist on this planet with us, and they're integrated with us. I don't know. I cannot say for definite it's aliens, but a lot of people seem to think it. And I believe that, this stems to people's belief system. I mean, if you're a sci-fi fan and you're into UFOs and aliens and all of that kind of stuff, and this happens to you, the immediate thing that comes to your mind is that must have been an alien abduction. If you're into ghosts and spirituality and it happens to you, then it's something from the other side. It could be a spirit or a ghost attacking you. So it does, the end result does rely on people's belief systems as far as what they could perceive it could be that has attacked them. But science definitely needs to take a big look at this subject, because there's a lot more to this than just what they can measure.
Absolutely, yeah, that's for sure. And just to sort of jump back a little bit to what I was saying, I guess, is just that it seems like sleep paralysis is so identified with abduction. Did you ever run into any sort of resistance, or did you notice that connection, how people, because when I first hear sleep paralysis, the first thing I think is, oh, that's that thing that they say is what abductions really are. And, like I said, there's more to the story than that. Have you noticed that sort of thing? Or obviously you guys realize there's more to sleep paralysis than just the scientific definition and everything, but also it does seem like it's gotten a bad rap because it's so tied in with debunking of abductions. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yes. I mean, science says there can't be any ghosts, and religion says, well, and I would be happy to talk about the Christian interpretation. I spoke with at least 30 members of the clergy. In the Christian world, yes, demons exist, and this may be real, but it's irrelevant because God is the only thing you have to focus on. So, we've kind of brushed this all under the rug, as far as giving it a bad rap. But what I wanted to say is, if you look very closely at the data, you'll have to conclude that there are very clear distinctions between the abductions and sleep paralysis. In other words, you've got to look at hundreds and hundreds of cases. And luckily enough, in the paranormal world, the sleep paralysis and the abduction stories, there are hundreds of stories. You can study them and compare them and find the similarities. This isn't just somebody's ghost story. It happens worldwide.
Well, it's happened for thousands of years. I mean, there are reports going way back, I believe, in the Greek mythology, talking about cases like this that they put down to these nightly nocturnal attacks. And it's amazing, we can't discard this, and science can't say that traditional beliefs or beliefs of people who are not from the Western world are therefore nonsense. It cannot be taken like that. These are too frequent. They happen to too many people, and everybody who's had this believes it was real. So we can't discard those experiences and just take the word of science and what they have to say.
And I don't mean to say that science is bad. That's not the point. It's just on the specific topic of sleep paralysis, there are too many assumptions and too little real statistical studies. And for the real work that's been done out there, there are very credible statements that, for example, this could be supernatural. I mean, imagine speaking with we have another researcher, Devin Hinton, who runs a clinic and has helped the Cambodian population following the genocide under Pol Pot, the Pol Pot regime from 74 to 79. And he speaks very eloquently of this. And he says, yes, we can treat this. We can give people drugs and we can calm them down, get them to sleep better, and the incidence of these attacks decreases. But if you look at it from a religious, sociological, or anthropological perspective, such as the way Dr. Hoffer did, you have to conclude that really this topic is saying, not just, hey, those of you out there who had this experience, hey, you're not crazy. It was real. But beyond that, we're actually suggesting that there is proof of a non-material reality out there. This isn't just another ghost story. That's amazing. What are the scientists and the doctors and the whole paranormal world going to do with that statement? No one has explained it away.
And another thing, Tim, I'm just going to jump in here and, talking about this non-material or, this other world that exists around us that people seem to be able to momentarily encounter. We also look at from the angle that there could be multiple dimensions. And if you imagine that, and a lot of scientists will probably say, oh, well, that's not possible, but there are some out there now that have agreed that this cannot be the only dimension in the universe or galaxies or wherever you want to say. I see it as every dimension, every plane of existence, all exists in the same space, and it's almost like an elastic ball. If you've ever seen one of those balls, it's made up of elastics, and each elastic represents a dimension or a plane of existence. It's all intertwined into the same space. I need to go into something else here. When you go to sleep and you reach your REM sleep, our brain has what's called the pineal gland, and it's a small gland in our brain that releases a chemical when we sleep called dimethyltryptamine, DMT, releases it into the bloodstream. And this DMT is known by some as the spirit molecule, and it's known by that name for, obvious reasons. It's the same chemical that's found in a brew called ayahuasca, which is consumed by the shamans down in the Peruvian jungles. And they use this DMT to reach the other side, to go into these altered states of consciousness where they can apparently, interact with spirits of past people. So when we sleep, our brains naturally produce this chemical. If it does what the shamans say it does, who's to know that when we go to sleep every night that we are not somehow able to experience another plane of existence, an altered state of consciousness? And it's pretty amazing because it all kind of starts to unravel into this big picture of possibilities that the human mind, when you're sleeping, is not unconscious. Some people believe it's unconscious. It's not. It's just an altered state of consciousness when you sleep, because when you dream, most times you wake up and you can remember your dreams. So how could you have been unconscious?
Yeah.
When you're unconscious, you have an operation in hospital and they give you an anesthetic and you wake up from that and you'll never remember any of that operation. But when you go to sleep, you can remember your dreams. So how can you be unconscious? And strange stuff happens during dream time. So I'm firmly believing that this stuff that people are experiencing, this normal human experience, is real. And it's real for a lot of these people. And we need to really bring this to the forefront so that all these people that have been misdiagnosed and are about to be misdiagnosed, can have some justice brought to them, because it's got to stop.
And have there been a lot of studies or any studies done on this sleep paralysis and trying to conjure up maybe some of these supernatural assault type experiences? Whether science.
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. There are shamans and shamanistic traditions that use sleep paralysis as a jumping off point for an experience that we've all heard a lot about. Particularly, people talk about transcendental meditation. Well, and by the way, sleep paralysis is not pleasant, and it never gets better. However, it doesn't usually last beyond the age of, say, 25, 26 years old. It usually calms down. We don't really know why.
And normally, Tim, if you go into sleep paralysis and it lasts for more than 15, say 20 minutes, it normally turns into an OBE, an out-of-body experience. And I have experienced this. I've had sleep paralysis 3 times in my life. And if it goes on for more than 15, 20 minutes, it can turn into an OBE. And this is where it gets interesting, because people, they all report the same descriptors when they have these OBEs. They all report this buzzing sound, this roaring sound in their head, and it sounds almost like a swarm of bees congregating around their head. So they report this. They report the sensation of floating up out of their body. They report the sensation of being able to pass through what we perceive as solid matter, walls, windows, and they go on to have these strange experiences where they encounter, these shadow-like entities or are able to see them. So this whole sleep paralysis thing has a lot more to it than just what science would have you believe. It's amazing, and the more we study it, we should do more studies on it, the more we're going to discover, and the more we're going to help people.
Tim, the shamans I was speaking about use sleep paralysis and then the terror that comes with it as a means for having an out-of-body experience. And there are a lot of theories about that. But it'd be very interesting to hear your listeners' comments. We're reaching a lot of people. Your emails may go crazy, but the out-of-body experiences, they're different. They all have a similarity. But one of the theories is that the assaults are so traumatic that after 12, 15, 20 minutes, the person just says, "I'm out of here. I'm leaving. I'm going to leave my body because I can't stand the experience of this anymore."
Yeah.
And we have people in the movie who talk about this experience from that very perspective, and it's quite profound.
All right, well, let me just sort of clarify here a little bit. I guess what I was trying to ask you, though, was have there been, official scientific-type studies into sleep paralysis, to look at what goes on in the brain when it happens so they can maybe figure out, what might cause it or
that's a great question, Tim. I honor that question. We actually, when we have a technician in our movie, it's very interesting to hear what he has to say, but we really tried to find out what it is possible to know about the experiences in the brain. And I really believe there are going to be some breakthroughs in science down the road here. But currently, all we can do is make statements about the level of brain activity when these experiences are going on. The technicians, the sleep doctors, the sleep specialists don't know what the patients experienced until they wake up and say, "Yeah, I was being attacked by a demon. I know it was real. It was horrible." And or they wake up and say, "Oh, I was having a nightmare, and my mother-in-law was visiting me." Nothing against mother-in-laws, but so far, all we have is quantitative evidence. In other words, we can measure how much activity is in the brain, but that's it. It's a little spiky graph on a piece of paper or on a computer screen. But as far as what is actually happening in the brain, we can tell where it's happening, but we don't know what's happening. Science is blind on that.
And one interesting thing to add to that is that one of the sleep technicians that we spoke to described a situation that happened that absolutely freaked him out. And what he said happened was that he was monitoring this person who was suffering from this sleep paralysis, and they use infrared cameras while they're monitoring these people. And he said he saw an orb appear in the frame. Now, orbs could be, it could be down to dust, it could be anything. But what's really strange about this is he said this orb moved as if it was moving in an intelligent way, and it moved across the room and went right over to the patient who was asleep in bed and landed on their arm. And the second the orb touched their arm, they jumped up in bed and their eyes snapped wide open.
Wow.
Now, he freaked out because at first he thought maybe it's a dust particle, but to see the patient react like that, who was fast asleep, to an orb touching them, it frightened him. He really got scared about that. So who's to know what's going on? But these sleep researchers are turning up some amazing results.
Yeah, it sounds like it. We need more research like that so we can kind of get to the bottom of it.
I'm curious, would you be interested in hearing what the clergy had to say? Should we cover that at some? Well, if you're interested in covering that, we'll fill you in whenever.
Okay, well, that might be a good part here because I'm going to get into my second favorite person in the film. Of course, we've already discussed my favorite person in the film, Heather, but my second favorite person in the film after Heather is someone you've already talked about, Dr. Hufford. Really amazing guy, and his sound bites were just gripping every time he came on the screen. It was like he's had something of serious importance and loftiness to what he had to say. And one of the things that he did say that I put down here in my notes was that we've erased it, and it being, I presume, obviously the sleep paralysis and the supernatural assaults, we've erased it from history. And he was talking about how, in the past, clergy and officials and stuff like that, and great thinkers or whatever would know about this and would talk about it, but nowadays, like, no one really seems to know about it or talk about it. It's in the fringes of science and mainstream knowledge. So I guess just talk a little bit about how sleep paralysis and the subsequent paranormal aspects of it seem to have been erased from history, as Dr. Hufford says.
It's really not very fair. I think the average Westerner will start to feel like they got the short end of the stick. We interviewed Latinos. We've spoken with members of the Mormon tradition. We've spoken with Newfoundlanders, and we've spoken with members of the Cambodian culture. And those cultures all have words for this. And if you're from Newfoundland, you say, I was hagrid last night. And one of the descriptions of the visitor in the night is really consistently, we found this in the Cambodian culture, the same thing. An old lady, something that looks like an old lady, comes into the room, and she's very scary. And so the Newfoundlanders say, "Yeah, I was Hagrid." And when they say it with their accent, it sort of sounds like haggard. I was haggard. And when you've had a very strong experience of sleep paralysis in the morning, you're worn right out. I mean, it's worse than just having a bad night of sleep. The Latinos, they can say yes, and of course the Christian faith is very strongly mixed in with their cultural beliefs, and they say, they attribute it to visitation from Satan. The name in the Mormon culture is the clamp, and these small groups of people all have a name for it, but the entire Western culture at large doesn't have any name for it, and it was erased. It was erased because it was irrelevant to the way we believe that we ought to be living. But it was also erased because, we think that people who talk about this kind of experience really ought to be marginalized and put on the fringe. And it's a horrible thing. But the fact of the matter is, hundreds of years ago, everyone would be able to speak about this. And everyone would say, yeah, I don't really understand the whole thing, but yeah, this is what happened to me. Yeah, it happened to me. I've heard stories of my relatives. Today, it's all been relegated to the realm of ghost stories. Yeah, there was a ghost in the house. My aunt used to hear something on the stairs. But it happens to so many people, but they all keep quiet because of this erasure from the language. We were hot in pursuit of an interview with the clergy, and we have members of the clergy who are willing to speak about this at this point. But at the time of production, as many as 30 members of the clergy, Christian clergy, refused to speak on tape. The strange thing was, across the board with the clergy, it didn't matter what denomination, Catholic, Baptist, Episcopal, they believe that this is a demon. They take a stance which is very, very unpalatable. They consistently say that the reason people are having these experiences, and I feel terrible about it, the reason people are having these experiences is because they do not have a pure relationship with God, and that they need to improve their morality and their ethics and their belief in God to have it stop. And they believe that these are demons. And it was recommended to me to have a long conversation with a demonologist. Strangely enough, they were the only people who were reluctant. I couldn't get one person to speak on film. It's so unfortunate because the key to the whole sleep paralysis experience lies in spirituality and religion. Everyone who prays during this, at the moment it occurs to them to pray, I think that's a quote from Dr. Hufford, but I've talked to many people who this is true for in my own personal experience, but if you pray, it stops. Go figure.
Yeah, yeah.
That is fascinating.
That might be a good part here for me to ask this question here. And a lot of the people, the experiencers in the video, talk about how, they're thinking all this stuff to themselves when it's going on and everything. But has anyone ever tried to, subliminally communicate with whatever the entity is and try and get some sort of answers that way? Do you know what I mean? If they can think, are they ever who are you? Why are you doing this to me? And get an answer?
It's too scary. Yeah, well, the people we spoke to, I mean, like Andrew just said, they were too petrified at that very moment in time to try and make communication with what was happening to them. They were more trying to figure out what the hell it was that was standing in front of them. So, in answer to that question, nobody that we spoke to said that they had tried to make communications with it, but what was amazing is after we had spoken to Heather, we gave her some ideas and some tips that had been given to us from some spiritual people who know how to use certain techniques to prevent this. She used those techniques, and she kind of, imagined herself wrapped in a bubble of light, almost like a calming envelope, something to calm her down just before she went to sleep. And she noticed that she was able, to sleep. And Heather used to sleep with the light on all the time. And now her frequency of sleep paralysis has virtually stopped. I mean, she now has more normal nights than she had before she spoke to us. So she was able to maybe not communicate directly with a spirit or something, but she communicated with, it could be, I don't know, consciousness or something, to just try to invoke some sense of normality into her nighttime routine, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah. But no one's, made any contact with these entities to try and,
There is a story. It's not someone I interviewed in person, but this story is one of the major reasons why I've never attempted this experience to happen to me. I guess I'll let you and the world of radio make up their own minds, but one of the people that was interviewed in the research was a pretty rugged guy, young guy, his early 20s, motocross racer, and, pretty tough guy and pretty high opinion of himself, and he had these experiences. And about the third night, he lived on a second-floor apartment. One of his good friends was on the first floor, and he decided to bring it on. Basically, he didn't like the fact that it got him so scared that he said, no, and it went away. So he went to sleep, and the next time it happened to him, he said, yeah, show me what you got. Show me how tough you are.
Yeah.
It didn't go over well. One of the comments from downstairs was, what were you doing last night? What'd you do, get up at 2 a.m. and rearrange your furniture? And what happened to you anyway? Because the guy came downstairs in the morning. He was completely worn out and depleted.
Huh. But what happened, though? I mean, you say the guy downstairs...
Threw him around the room.
Okay, there we go. Let's get some details.
Threw him up against the wall. And the people who see this creature consistently say that it looks at you with a kind of haughty, kind of arrogant look. It's not really common to get that clear a view to this, but some of those, it makes you wonder what inspired those paintings, like the Fuseli painting in the film, where there's a little squat troll-like creature sitting on someone's chest. But I've heard it right out of people's mouths. This is what I saw. And it's kind of saying, look how tough I am. I'm stronger than you. But interestingly enough, there's a limit to their power. And I think there's something to do with the power of the spirit, the power of God, really. They seem to be much stronger than human beings, but there seems to be a limit to what they're allowed to do. Not necessarily what they could do, but what they're allowed to do. I can't explain it more than that, but I've heard so many versions of this, and it, and that appears to be why it goes away. It almost runs away when people invoke their God, whether it's, Buddhism or the Hindu God or the Christian God or what have you.
Yeah. Now,
and I hope I've answered your question, because I think that's really striking at the heart of the matter. Is this a spiritual reality? Or is this some, demonic ghost story like Nightmare on Elm Street?
Well, it sounds more like a spiritual thing based on what you're telling me here with the praying and all that stuff.
I think it is a spiritual thing, and Dr. Hufford has kind of turned a leaf as in his retirement, because he says that he thinks he didn't take a strong enough stance, and out of necessity. I mean, when you're talking about demons in the world of the university world, the world of studies and science, you have to tone things down a little bit. But no one has come up with a better explanation. He has had to draw the conclusion that this is a real spiritual reality, and I call to researchers, amateur and professional, to come on and take our work, look at our film, and take it further and see if they can actually answer some of these questions more thoroughly. And Paul's been very nice to let me finish this little segment here, but he's dying to add to this.
Yeah, Tim, there's one thing that, just while we've spoken about religion and the clergy, that I want to add to this is, when Andrew called certain members of the clergy up, a few of them actually warned us. They said, what they basically said was, stay away from this. They warned us and they said, nothing good will come of this. This will actually bring bad to you or your project.
Oh, wow.
Now, yeah, this kind of, at the time, when we were hearing it from more than one source, we were like, what do these guys know that we don't? So we continued with our project, and nothing was going to stop this project. And strangely enough, just as predicted, weird stuff started happening. We've spoken about this before with, previous interviews, but strange stuff started happening around this project. I mean, when we were interviewing people, I was going through the tapes to edit the show up or the film up, and 11 people, out of all of the people we interviewed, over 60 people, 11 of those people completely lost their voice during the interviews. We had to bring them water. They had to take breaks. One interview we had to postpone and continue the next day.
Wow.
Not only that, Heather, the girl in the interview that, you spoke of earlier.
Yeah.
She was driving her car. She just bought a brand new SUV. She was driving her car shortly after she interviewed with us, and she was T-boned at an intersection, smashed up. We thought, when we heard about the crash, we thought Heather was gone. But she actually survived. She's fine now. Dr. Hufford was T-boned at an intersection down in Media, Pennsylvania. Him and his family were in the car. They were T-boned. Everyone who's been around this spot. There was a lady called Jane Mullen who's in our show. She's a psychic intuitive, and she's in our show talking about these shadow beings, these demons. She has a shop, and she sells all New Age stuff. She took 15 copies of our DVD, put them in her shop. I'm not saying these DVDs were connected to this or the cause of this. Jane Mullen's shop burned to the ground, and that anyone who Googles that, shop burns to the ground in, I believe it's in Farmington, her shop, Farmington, Maine, and type in Jane Mullen, you'll probably come up with the story. It was published in our local newspaper up here. So Jane's shop burnt. All these strange coincidences kept happening, and the priest told us that this stuff would happen. We had so many technical difficulties. I've been making films and editing corporate videos for decades, 12 years. I've never come across the amount of problems that we had making this film. It's ridiculous.
Oh,
so something strange happened.
Am I going to be okay?
I hope so. I hope so.
In episode 2F09, when Ichi plays Scratchy's skeleton like a xylophone, he strikes the same rib twice in succession, yet he produces two clearly different tones. Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
You're listening to Banal of America Audio.
I'll field this one. Let me ask you a question. Why would a man whose shirt says genius at work spend all of his time watching a children's cartoon show?
I withdraw my question.
I mean, one of the radio shows we did previous to this.
Oh, Jesus. Now you got... All right, go on. I'm getting scared.
Yeah. One of the radio shows we did with a guy called Captain Jack. You can listen to this on our website. We've got the stream on there. He freaked out because he had so many technical difficulties. He said, "I've never experienced this before." His stuff was going, his board was going down, his mics were going down, the phone lines were cutting off. It was crazy. It was a crazy night.
Jeez, yikes! I don't want to be T-boned.
He missed us. He missed the first 45 minutes of the interview with us because he couldn't get anything to work.
Strange. Well, luckily everything's working out all right for us on our end, and like I said,
I'm impressed. We're expecting things to go wrong, and I guess you've mastered the spiritual world.
Well, let's not go that far, but I still have to run. I still have to run down to the liquor store after the interview's over, so I'll be watching out for T-bonings.
Yeah, but
Heather's okay. Heather's okay. Don't worry.
What's that?
Heather's okay. Don't worry.
I'm just going to bite my tongue and not say anything.
Yeah. No, it was just something I thought I'd add. It was just an interesting side of the topic that we were warned, and this stuff started happening.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't making fun of you or anything. I was just, I'd never actually heard the expression T-bone, so.
Oh,
it must be an English
American
thing.
term.
Now, everybody in the movie says that this is, all negative and stuff. Has anyone ever had, a positive experience, or is it always negative?
No, although there is a woman who did not have one of these assaults, and she took the movie in a wonderful direction because she simply had an out-of-body experience. She's a librarian, and she talked about the wider universe, and she cannot wait for the experience to happen again. Every one of our subjects, every one of the people who interviewed with us had their lives completely changed by this experience. And her experience, since she was not traumatized by it, was changed from the perspective that for her, there is a wider, joyful world out there in the universe, and we need to discover it. And she's very glad that we're making this film because of the positive excitement about this greater universe and the bliss of these out-of-body experiences. Everyone's spirituality increased because of these experiences. Most people left their church.
Weird.
They left their church because they weren't allowed to talk about it. They weren't allowed to go into their church and say, I was attacked by a demon.
Yeah.
Because people think that, that's not really a good thing to have around. But in the absence of having their church handle it in a helpful way, they searched for other avenues of spirituality. Their spiritual experience deepened, which is profound for me. I think that's a beautiful and fantastic story, and it's unfortunate that it takes trauma to have this happen for some people, but I think it is positive. I think we benefit from having. I mean, this is me talking from my own personal point of view, not from the point of view of a director here and producer of a film. But I think it's important for people to increase their spiritual experience.
Yeah.
In any way they can. Life is better when you do that, I think.
And now, one thing I did notice when I was watching the movie, up until about a third or maybe a quarter of the way through, is a lot of the experiencers at the beginning were women, and then you brought some men in who had the experience, so it kind of debunked what I was going to ask. But I guess I will phrase it this way: is there any sort of trend here as far as, now you said it stops around when people are 25 or something like that? But is there any other sort of overarching trends you guys have noticed with the sleep paralysis and the supernatural assault, in the sense that, more women than men, a certain age group, certain social standing, anything like that we might be able to draw some kind of conclusions or connect some dots, if you will, about what's going on here?
There is a link. There's only one link. And quite frankly, amateur filmmakers of the world go for it because people are out there to be interviewed. But we chose not to include in our film one aspect of this, but maybe for a film for a later date. But the Cambodians that we have in our film bring this out. And basically, trauma in childhood may well make this much more likely to happen. But I cannot draw any conclusions about it at all. However, the Cambodian population, roughly 99% of the living Cambodians today, witnessed at least one, if not several, members of their own family and many, many more members of their own community, excuse me for going gruesome here for a moment, but starve to death or get brutally murdered during that reign. And the prevalence of sleep paralysis with a supernatural presence in the Cambodian population is higher than in any known population across the planet. So I think in answer to your question, the link between trauma and things like PTSD and supernatural assault is ripe for very serious study, and I think Paul can fill in more along these lines.
Yeah, we spoke to quite a few Cambodian people, and we went to a clinic as well and spoke to them about some of the horrific experiences that they witnessed during the Pol Pot reign between 1975 and 1979. And, one of the guys that we interviewed, he broke down crying as he was describing watching his own father being taken out of their home right outside the doorstep and executed right in front of him. As a child, he saw this happen. And there was another guy that we interviewed that saw something very similar. He saw a lady blown to pieces right in front of him as they were walking through a minefield. So these traumatic experiences that these people witnessed, they carried those through their lives, and this really brought on the sleep paralysis for them. I mean, they have suffered. I mean, some of these guys were in their 40s and they were still having sleep paralysis, which is not very common. So they must have had some serious built-up PTSD trauma inside them to cause this to happen. And what's amazing is the Cambodian culture, they actually have rituals that they perform. We went to a temple in Lowell, Massachusetts, and watched a ceremony. We filmed it, a ceremony where a monk would bless these people and help them to overcome this sleep paralysis. He would start off by telling their fortune. He would then chant and say some prayers over them, and then tie a band around their wrist. And all of these things that the monk did actually helps these people to cope with what they're experiencing. And we spoke to the monk afterwards and interviewed him at length. And we'll probably post this interview up. We didn't have time to put the whole interview in the video, but we'll definitely post it on our site and allow people to see it. But he actually said to us there are two parts to sleep paralysis. And the way he explains it is pretty amazing. He says one part of sleep paralysis is definitely down to the person's body, the trauma, experiences that they've had, stress that they're carrying. And he said the second part comes from the spirit world. It comes from, as he said, consciousness. And he said these are definitely entities, non-material forms that are trying, or he says they're looking for a new place to be reborn. And I don't know exactly how that connects into somebody who's experienced sleep paralysis, because they're already, a body. They're already born and they're already living in a body. So why these entities would be looking to be reborn, I don't know. But what he said is that one side is trauma and one side is spiritual. And he was there was no doubt in his mind that this was real.
Huh, interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask if there was some kind of collective consciousness trauma thing at work here. So it sounds like maybe there might be two sort of aspects. Maybe the trauma opens the door for the entities or something like that.
It could be that. And, it'd be very interesting. And I'd love to hear if any Marines, any people who went to Iraq and saw stuff that could cause trauma. I know the Marines from Iraq are suffering from this PTSD. it would be amazing to find out if any of those guys and girls out there or back home now have suffered any bouts of sleep paralysis, anything that sounds remotely like what we're talking about, because it would be an amazing correlation to make with the Cambodians seeing their trauma, to the American Marines seeing the trauma in Iraq. If we could find that out, this would start to open up some more avenues for us.
I think that there is probably a great increase of these experiences among the military, and if you're hearing this and this has happened to you, definitely go to our website. You can contact us, soulsmack.com, and you might want to pick up a copy of our movie and watch it and realize that you're not alone and you're not crazy. And I emphasize, every single person we interviewed in our documentary film was healed by the process of speaking about it. The silence that's in Western culture on this issue is one of the primary causes of why people don't seem to get over it.
Yeah.
For years and years sometimes.
And then the big stumbling block for any paranormal field really is the overwhelming, borderline cloying need by many people for some kind of evidence, physical evidence. Now, as far as these supernatural assaults go, do we have anything like that, in the form of scratches or marks, or, like you said, the guy said the furniture sounded like the furniture was being moved around, stuff being knocked around that normally you wouldn't think that somebody could do, you know what I mean? Like a giant bureau or something gets shifted across the room when it's just one person in the room, or any sort of physical evidence that we know about here as far as these supernatural assaults.
I think that's an avenue that is probably not very fruitful. We're talking about experiences that are scary. How do you measure or photograph that somebody got scared,
Yeah.
And another thing to add, Tim, is that, a lot of people who have this sleep paralysis do describe this out-of-body experience. They do describe this disconnect from their physical bodies. So what if this is at a spiritual level? What if the body is absolutely nothing to do with the equation? And, that could explain why, I'm not saying it is, but it could explain why there's no physical marks on the human body, because this could be happening outside of the realms of the human body. And, if people are experiencing these strange entities, forms, attacks in altered states of consciousness, the body really has nothing to do with it, because you're free from the body at that point.
If you're having a friend visit you in your house, and the friend comes and you have a cup of tea and put the dishes in the dishwasher, and the friend goes home, someone's not going to come up and ask you to prove that the friend was there. But in the absence of proof that a demon was there, we seem to think we're on to something. The fact of the matter is, the evidence is incontrovertible. There are mountains of evidence. 1 in 5 people experience sleep paralysis. Someone who speaks Japanese, someone who speaks Cambodian, someone who's a Christian, someone who's a Muslim, will describe the same black, menacing creature coming into their room. Hundreds and hundreds of people have already spoken of this. Email after email comes in confirming this. The evidence is overwhelming. It's up to science to actually say, you know what? I have not been able to actually prove this did not happen. And if 10 people say they saw an airplane fly over, we tend to assume that probably there was an airplane flying over. But if 10 people say they were attacked by a demon in their sleep, we tend to say that they're crazy if we're a member of Western culture. But that's illogical. It's irrational to say that it didn't happen because it can't happen.
Yeah.
People who are having these experiences are rational and they are logical. And it's a normal human experience that's borne out in history. The evidence is document after document after document. And it's amazing. You can read any number of authors and they simply describe these things and they don't even make a big deal of it because it's kind of like code. Everyone knows that, oh yeah, that happened to me. Oh, he had one of those horrible experiences. What a coincidence it happened on the night of a big storm.
And we even interviewed people on the street, Tim. I mean, we went out to Portland and we done a day down on the street, and we randomly selected people as they were walking by and asked them the question, have you ever woken up in the middle of the night unable to move? And that's all we said to them. And you would be shocked. I mean, on the DVD, you have a copy. Go to the section where it says street survey. You'll see the amount of people that we found in a random survey that had sleep paralysis. And one guy, it was amazing. We asked the question, and the group of people we asked all said, no, we haven't had that. So we said, let's just take one of them anyway. We took a young lady and we spoke to her about sleep paralysis and just gave her some of the descriptors after we had asked the question. And as we were giving her the descriptors, one of the guys that previously said no stepped forward and said, that happened to me. I didn't know that's what you meant. So it's only when people start talking about it, they realize that, hey, I experienced this at some point in my life. So it's pretty amazing when you start talking about it, how many people start coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah, and just to sort of clarify, or I guess put a more finite point on what I was saying here, and I'm not trying to besmirch the people who...
You're great, Tim. It's really, really good. And we kind of emphasized this point about, all of this body of evidence, but there's no smoking gun.
Yeah,
and I'd love to respond to further questions in that realm, because it's great. It's almost like in the absence of a captured demon in a cage, are we going to be able to convince everybody? But anyway, go ahead. I'd love to hear what you're.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, you use the analogy of, if you have a friend over for tea and everything, but if I had a friend over for tea and he attacked me, chances are there'd be some kind of sign on my body that he attacked me, whether it was like a punch in the face or a scratch or whatever. But what you guys are saying is that we don't have anybody that we know of that have experienced these supernatural assaults, and then, the next day they wake up and, they got a huge gash on their arm or something crazy like that.
Well, there's, from the people that we spoke to, no. I can't say that any of them were physically marked. The girl that was sexually assaulted, and, we didn't actually mention this, but when people are sexually assaulted, there's usually what they call the succubus or the incubus that initiates the attack. And people can look those words up and read all about those. I'm not going to go into them. But this girl felt this sexual contact. She felt violated. She felt humiliated. And she didn't even want to be touched by her boyfriend after these attacks had happened to her. It turned her off physical relationships, and she's had a hard time with it. So for her, the physical contact was there, but the marks, she wasn't marked by it. She felt it. She actually felt what was going on.
Yeah.
And to go on to talk about people giving off or showing signs of the attack, there was a group of Southeast Asians called the Hmong. Now, this was something that needs to be talked about, but I want to stress clearly now, sleep paralysis does not kill. The Hmong people of Southeast Asia were refugees over here in America, and they were dying. There was guys dying in their sleep, and on autopsy, no cause of death can be found. And you can hear Dr. Huffer talking about this because he researched this extensively.
Yeah.
What happened was, at first, because the Hmong knew of sleep paralysis, they knew of this, they attributed these deaths to sleep paralysis. They said these guys were suffering from sleep paralysis and they were dying in their sleep. Well, it wasn't actually the case. What was happening was these guys were turning up dead all over the place, and the autopsy was being conducted and nothing was found. But what they actually discovered afterwards was there were many, contributors to what was happening to them, and some of them were simple things like, they were stressed out, and they were over here in the United States, a whole dietary change, a whole way of life change, and some of them suffered from heart arrhythmias in their sleep. Now, heart arrhythmias cannot, it's very hard to detect those on autopsy, and that's what the cause of death was. These guys were dying of heart arrhythmia. And because it was very hard to detect, they automatically assumed it was the sleep paralysis and the demons and the shadow people killing them.
Yeah.
So, it's worth mentioning that because that was once a physical attribute that people believed was real.
The ramifications of that are significant because the conclusion is that these very young, healthy people died of heart arrhythmias. But there's no evidence for that. There's absolutely zero scientific evidence to demonstrate that someone died of a heart arrhythmia.
Yeah.
Yet we're able to draw that conclusion. However, but I would love to be able to tell you that someone got their arms scratched, or someone had marks on their neck where they were being choked, and I guess I'll just have to say there is no such evidence. So you people who've had this experience need to speak up, because you're not alone. Even if you can't prove it by some sort of mark, nobody else has a mark either, but they're convinced it's real.
Right, yeah. Like I said, I'm not trying to debunk these people or their stories or whatever. I'm just trying to put together as much as we can of the story here and try and pursue every avenue available.
Yeah, and I don't. Yeah, I mean, you can't help but ask. How, if you were attacked, show me what happened to you. And we haven't been able to demonstrate, proof of what happened beyond people's recollections, other than through the consistency of people's stories.
Right. Now, has science... Now, you say, like, they haven't really been able to explain this. Have they tried to? Have they put forth an idea that, you experience sleep paralysis, then your brain tries to, tie some kind of rational thing to it, so it makes up this whole fantasy, or whatever you want to call it, scenario where you're being attacked by some kind of entity just because, your brain has to fit it into what works within the framework of what you know. Do you know what I mean? If I was an armchair psychologist or whatever, maybe I'd put that forward. Do you know what I mean? So have they tried to explain that, and what do you think of that whole idea?
Well, I can give you, in a moment, after Paul addresses this, I can give you one of the researchers' perspectives on this.
Yeah, obviously scientists have come up with their own theories and ideas on what causes the sleep paralysis, and there's many famous, I might name one name, but there's some in the UK that I knew of, and there's a guy called Persinger, who invented what he terms as the God helmet. I'm not saying he's trying to make a scientific claim on it, but he's actually demonstrated that these feelings or these sensations can be triggered using electromagnetic frequencies. And he's created a device, and people can look this up, called the God helmet.
Mm-hmm.
You may have heard of this, Tim.
I think I've vaguely heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, well, he puts this it looks like a crash hat. He puts it on, and it's got small magnets, electromagnets in it, and he can trigger off areas of the brain or stimulate areas of the brain and cause these bizarre effects. And some people have said it was almost a spiritual experience when they wore this God helmet. Your eyes, your visual sensations are cut off. They cover your eyes, and they just have you there in a dark room, silent room, and they start stimulating areas of your brain. And what people have found is that they have the exact same descriptions of what they were feeling. They sensed the presence in the room. They felt, like they were going to be attacked. Some people claimed that they felt out-of-body experiences. All sorts of strange phenomena was happening. This goes to prove that the brain is a big electromagnetic computer. It's a big, it's an organ, and it has powerful potential. So who knows what causes, the real sleep paralysis events that happen or what people experience, but science has proven that this could be replicated and actually induced using their method.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as Dr. Devin Hinton is I believe I can express his point of view clearly. He's a researcher at Harvard University, and he's been working with victims of PTSD and other traumas, and he's done some real groundbreaking work among the Cambodians that we've been speaking about. And I'm pretty sure that he doesn't believe that there's a spiritual component to this, but I think his argument is ripe for further explanation, because he treats the victims of supernatural assault with various kinds of therapy techniques he's developed. He's quite innovative in his work, and the combination of medication and therapy and meditational work largely diminishes the experience of supernatural assault. And he tends to say, therefore, it's not spiritual. Therefore, there's nothing supernatural about it. But, if I give a person who has a heart problem medication, and the heart problem is less frequent or diminishes or appears to heal, it's not necessarily logical to say, therefore there was no heart problem.
Yeah.
So, that's one of the arguments, I think, in the vein that you're looking at. And I think a lot more research could be done, and a lot more interesting work could be presented.
Well, that's kind of a good segue, I guess, just to ask, what else can be done here with this sort of research? Would we need to do, if money was no object, what would you guys suggest? Like an intensive study on these people who are experiencing these sleep paralysis, supernatural assault episodes, and, to try and figure out if we can, get an idea of what's happening, or capture an incident like that on film, so maybe we could, analyze that, infrared or whatever, like you guys were saying with the orb.
Yeah, if money was no object, I would like to see a study done where, we took in a couple of thousand people who said they suffer from sleep paralysis, and maybe a couple of thousand people who didn't, and just monitor them, hook them up, and use the state-of-the-art equipment like cameras that can see on multiple light wave frequencies. I mean, we want cameras that can look in infrared, cameras that can look in ultraviolet, cameras that can look in all the frequencies of light, and monitor them with those cameras, and just see if anything can be caught. I mean, and also correlate everybody's experiences and see what's going on. It's really the only way, we're going to get some real serious results. I mean, we've had the results, but it's spread out over decades of research. It'd be great to get a group of sufferers together and see if we can really capture something happening, or start to correlate experiences and try to make deductions from that.
I think that would be a great area to look into. I think another thing to be done, which is quite a bit less expensive to do, which is to simply take the data that exists, do another study if you want to, if you need to be convinced yourself. Take the data that exists and reanalyze and reevaluate the quality of the data, and then follow science and say, well, this is irrefutable data. If we have this many witnesses to this experience, then it must be real, because we believe that the Bible is real, but nobody has the original copy of the Bible. Yet nobody doubts its existence. It's obviously a real historical document, and all of the research done on sleep paralysis and supernatural assault is real documentation. And at some point, it needs to be taken as valid. And we need to stop discounting people's experiences as evidence of some craziness, because it's really not fair.
Yeah,
I don't think.
But when you look at the paranormal world as a whole, that what you said could be applied to just about every genre.
Yeah. Do you think so?
Yes, I think if if we took every UFO sighting that there was and re-examined them, you'd have to come to the conclusion that UFOs are real, but they don't do that. And they don't do that with ghosts or Bigfoot or anything else. So it's like science won't.
I think that it's almost as if I don't mean to interrupt, but it's almost as if researchers in the paranormal world sometimes buy into the concept that no one's going to believe them. Because really evidence is evidence, and it needs to be compiled. I think that the abduction experiences, out-of-body experiences, and supernatural assault and bereavement stories, for loss, revisitations of loved ones who have gone on. Those four realms of human experience have compelling evidence to suggest that, it's real. And there's no sense in dismissing it. And, science may build a great house and may put someone on the moon, but if your grandmother is visiting you and has something to say to you, that is much more useful than, any pure science experience or any trip to the moon, because she's probably got something to pass on, and we ought to adopt it in the next generation.
Well, you never met my grandmother, so let's not go there.
Hey, Tim, another thing, is this is just a question I've thrown out there. It's like, why has science always dismissed these types of topics that people are so adamant are real? So many people have reported. So many visual sightings have happened. I mean, I'm not just talking about sleep paralysis. I'm talking about UFOs, ghosts, everything. Why has this area of science been so condemned, so suppressed? What is going on? That they feel they have to rubbish this side of human experience or this side of reality. It boggles the mind to what exactly it is they're trying to keep us from. Are they trying to keep us from the fact that there is something else more to our existence than we perceive and experience every day? It just boggles my mind that science has continually rubbished this stuff. Why, as soon as somebody posts something on the internet, there's 10 people jumping all over it from the scientific community saying nonsense, rubbish, and it's like, why? Why are they doing it?
That's the question I think that drives all of us who are in the field to keep trying to get answers here. Science is a religion in and of itself at this point, and those who are heavily into it need to be the smartest one in the room. And so, if they can't explain something, then they ignore it. That seems to be the way it is.
Tim, we may be wrapping this up here a little bit, but this might be a good note if you can fit it into the interview here. We have the laws of physics. We have Sir Isaac Newton and all of the things he discovered, and yet the science of physics agrees today that 90% of the matter and energy that is in the universe has not been seen, that it's invisible. That the universe is expanding at a certain rate, and we don't understand why it's expanding, but in just a recent couple of years, it's been proven that dark matter out there, called dark matter because it can't be seen. If our current laws of physics are based on only 10%, only the 10% of matter that's visible and measurable, then what's going to happen to the laws of physics when we actually start to see and measure and quantify and qualify the 90% of the universe that hasn't been discovered? We've drawn all our conclusions based on only 10% of what's in the universe. And I think it's really fair to say that the unknown may really redefine a lot of things that we've concluded and a lot of the ways we're going to see the world in the future.
Yeah. Paul, were you going to say something there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and the 90% or 90, I don't know if it's 90, 95% of the matter that's out there, the subatomic particles, everything that exists that we can't measure yet. What if all of a sudden our brain was rewired and we were able to perceive all of that? What would we see around us? What would our world be like? It goes even down as far as our DNA. Our DNA, they only understand, I believe, 3% of what, out of 100% of what it does. The 97% of our DNA they call junk. How can 97% of something be junk? That's amazing to me that they come out with statements like that. You know, there's a lot more out there than we're being told. There's a lot more out there than we understand. And it's about time people like people like us, what we're doing, and other people out there that are investigating. There's a lot of them coming out. There's a big shift in consciousness, and everybody, I don't know if they're tapping into this conscious mind, this one conscious mind, but the results are coming out. And as far out as some people's ideas sound, I believe all of you out there should listen to them. There's a lot of people out there coming out with some groundbreaking stuff, and you should listen to them, because some of the questions that we're trying to answer here or trying to make sense of, these guys are way down the road. And it's not going to be long before a lot of the world, a lot of what we see makes more sense to us.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we can hope for some kind of sea change here with the paranormal world, where I'm of the opinion that once one domino falls, that several will fall in succession after that. So,
exactly. Given all those big ideas that we just talked about, maybe it's not so far, not so far-fetched that there are demons or other things out there. You know, maybe it's really not such a revolutionary idea. You know, maybe your listeners will take the time to look into our film and to start making their own films.
Another idea to put out there is, you know, who's to say that these shadow entities that are coming to visit people at night in this paralyzed state are demons? Who knows that they're not just other living beings? They could be operating on a different frequency, like I said earlier. They could be as conscious and as living as we are now, but just operating in a different frequency realm. And, you know, we perceive them as demons because that's pretty much what most of us in the Western world would say is a demon or it's a UFO. Who knows that they're not actual living entities, that, you know, they're conscious beings. That's all they could be. But we perceive them as evil, as demons. I don't know. I'm just putting that out there because that could be one of the answers.
There's one thing on your website that's kind of like a little teaser that's not in the movie that I wanted to ask you about, and that's the Bruce Lee article. Did Bruce Lee suffer from sleep paralysis? And I just wanted to ask you about that because it was kind of strange, and I never really heard much about that before.
Yeah, that article was written by a guy out of England, and it basically talks about Bruce Lee's battle. I mean, if anyone watches the film, I believe it's called The Dragon, or The Life Story of Bruce Lee. I think it's called The Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically depicts in the film, you see Bruce Lee doing battle when he sleeps with demons. You can see in the movie that young Bruce Lee as a child is sleeping and he's having these tremendous battles. And even as an adult, he's having these battles with demons in his sleep. And he's paralyzed, and you know, it's pretty much a good description of sleep paralysis, but they've woven it into the film in such a way that it looks like, you know, this is something that Bruce Lee was personally experiencing on a spiritual level. It's pretty interesting. I mean, anyone who hasn't seen the film should look it up, The Life Story of Bruce Lee, and you'll see exactly what he suffered through. And it's been documented and written about, so it's not something that was just made up.
Okay, yeah, it's kind of weird. And then sort of like the final question here, aside from the what's next for you guys, and we'll get to that in a moment, but sort of the final question here is just, you know, if someone is suffering from these sleep paralysis episodes and the supernatural assault phenomenon, what do you suggest they do aside from contacting you guys and you know, that kind of fun stuff? But what are the practical measures that someone could do if they're experiencing this kind of thing?
Yeah, you can definitely see some detailed descriptions of that in the movie, and in listening to the experiences of the individual people, Amy and Heather and the others. People can draw their own conclusions. As Dr. Hufford says, don't sleep on your back. And if you're tired, get some sleep, normal, regular sleep in the nighttime, if at all possible. You know, don't, if you suffer from sleep paralysis or supernatural assault, don't lie around in bed in the early morning and sort of try to fall asleep again, because it's very likely to happen to you during that period. since making this film, I've discovered that I think that sleep paralysis tends to come on like a near miss, and people will understand that sort of half awake, half asleep experience where they feel this rush, and that's likely to be the beginnings of sleep paralysis. If that's happening to you, get up, walk around, get wide awake, and go back to sleep at normal hours. Also, pray if it happens to you, and also know that it's not going to kill you. There's no evidence that it kills you. It won't get more pleasant. It will remain unpleasant, but it probably won't be a permanent thing, although it's devastating. And finally, talk to people about it. Tell them it's a normal experience. Tell them that you need some help and some support, and that you're not crazy, and you'll feel a lot better about it.
And there are resources all over the web for people who have experienced sleep paralysis. There are groups and forums, and we hope to become, our website, soulsmack.com, a great resource for people who suffer from sleep paralysis. We've got forums up there, and people can post their experiences and read experiences of others. Like Andrew said, don't nap in the morning. Napping in the morning can bring this on, and I, for one, have experienced that from napping in the morning. I didn't describe my experience when that happened, but don't do it. Don't sleep on your back if you don't have to. Sleeping on your back tends to cause sleep paralysis to be more prevalent. Get normal amounts of sleep, not lots. Get normal amounts of sleep, and don't deprive yourself of REM sleep. If you have a REM deprivation, they've done studies where they deprived people of REM sleep, and they sent them out into the world, and strange things were happening. They were seeing stuff. It was almost like the lack of REM sleep causes you to hallucinate. I wouldn't recommend doing that. And if you do have sleep paralysis, like Andrew said, I'm just going over these points again, but if you do have it, don't go straight back to sleep. Go downstairs or go upstairs, wherever you live, and get a glass of water, walk around a bit, just relax, calm yourself down, and go back to bed after that. And try to imagine yourself wrapped in a safe bubble of light. Just relax. Think of good thoughts before you go to sleep. It tends to help with stopping sleep paralysis becoming a reality for you. So, yeah, just do these things, and definitely don't be afraid to talk to others about it, because, although some people might look at you a bit strange, a lot of people have had this, and if none of your friends have, contact forums, blog on forums about it, and talk to other people, because there are millions, billions out there. 1 in 5 could be a billion people on this planet or more that have had sleep paralysis. So you're not alone.
Okay, that's a great way to sort of wrap up the sleep paralysis talk here. You're not alone, folks. So listen to the advice here from Andrew and Paul regarding that kind of thing. Is there any way to induce sleep paralysis if someone was crazy enough to try that?
Yes, there is, and I've done it myself. So I'm not going to recommend anyone does this. During the making of this documentary, I had sleep paralysis happen to me with an out-of-body experience, and I documented the whole experience on tape. I have yet to post that to the web. But if anyone's crazy enough to try this, the simplest way to do it is deprive yourself of sleep. Deprive yourself of sleep. And again, I don't recommend doing this, but if you nap in the morning, like if you keep napping, waking up short breaks of sleep and going back to sleep, chances are you'll see what sleep paralysis is all about.
Ooh, that's scary. Yeah, we don't recommend people do that. Don't do that. If you do it and something happens, don't sue me. I don't want to be responsible for your foolish antics. So, don't do that, folks.
No, it's definitely a way to induce it, but again, I don't recommend anyone try this because it's no fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't do it, because I can't afford to be sued either. And I'm sure the Soul Smack guys don't either, because I'll take them down with me.
No. We definitely don't want to know about anyone suing us.
Yeah, so don't don't follow through with what he said, because chances are you may not even induce sleep paralysis. You may just be so messed up you go crash your car or something retarded like that, and then then next thing you know, I'm getting legal papers in the mail because someone's like, I listened to that sleep paralysis episode and I did that, and then I crashed into a telephone pole and all. So we don't want that. All right, is Andrew still there? Paul, are you there? I lost you. Hello, is anyone there? Jesus.
Well, what do you say to that?
I don't know, dude. Hold on. Let me flash you and I'll get fucking Paul on the line. Hold on a second.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, what's up? Let me flash Andrew over here. Hold on a second.
All right.
All right, y'all there?
Hey.
What?
Hey, listen, before we go any further, right, listen to this. You're calling us on 2 cell phones, independent cell phones, and my cell phone switched off and Andrew's switched off at exactly the same time. What's that all about?
That's pretty spooky.
That's exactly what Dr. Hufford says, spooky forces. That's what Einstein said.
Yeah, that is pretty strange. That was kind of weird, and I wasn't sure what was going on there, because all of a sudden it got really quiet after I said I'd take you guys down with me, so I was like, oh shit, I offended them.
You want to know what's even weird?
What did you say, Tim? I missed it. What did you say?
I said if anyone sued me, I'd take Soul Smack down with me, so that's why we couldn't.
What sued you over what?
Over, how long ago did you get cut out? Over Paul's advice on how to induce sleep paralysis.
Oh, right.
Tim, we were warned not to tell the world about it, but the thing is, Tim, my phone is plugged into the mains. I've got the wire into the mains into my phone. I've been talking on it perfectly all night, and boom, at the exact same time as Andrew's mind goes off.
We'll have to include this in the episode here so people can hear how creepy and weird that was.
Yeah, that was weird. That was weird. My phone's never done that before.
Strange.
Yeah, Tim, sleep paralysis doesn't kill. So no one's gonna sue us and litigate based on and get any kind of award based on the fact that they were attacked by a demon.
No, but as I was saying, someone could try and induce sleep paralysis through the means that Paul suggested, and then, next thing you know, they're just sleep deprived and they get into a car accident or do something stupid. Then it's
like...
They're
not stupid enough to try it.
Yeah.
Because it's not pleasant.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I was trying it, and then I fucking dropped my toaster in the bathtub, and...
Yeah.
Well, you seem to think that it would be okay for this to happen to you. And I have to tell you that I have never encouraged it to happen to me. I've seen people who have it, and they're terrified, and they're traumatized. And most people have trouble going to sleep every night because it happened even once. If they get over 50 and 60 and 70, it's so far in the past for them that they tend not to think about it. But if you ask them about it, it's right on the tip of their tongue. And they say, I never want that to happen again. So I don't encourage you or anyone to play with this. And if the shamans want to do something with it, I don't know what kind of inner force and inner strength they have, but more power to them.
Yeah, well, I'm a troublemaker, so I'll take on that kind of thing. So I'm not.
I'm thinking maybe we're a little bit troublemakers here, taking on the world and saying, hey, this is irrefutable evidence. I hope that we're stirring up a few bees hives here.
Well, I think we'll get a good reaction here to the episode. I'm sure of that, because as you said, it's occurred for a lot of people, and chances are they haven't heard too much media about it, and that's going to change when they hear this interview we've done tonight. Now, Soul Smack, you're kind of a new company here. This is your first film, I believe, from Soul Smack, is Your Worst Nightmare, but you said you have quite a few different projects in the till. So what's next for Soul Smack? What can people expect from you guys coming on down the line? I'm looking forward to it because, as I said, the production values in Your Worst Nightmare were outstanding and really a cut above the rest as far as paranormal films go. So I'm looking forward to seeing, where you guys turn your cameras next. So what can we expect from you guys?
Well, what we're working on right now is we begin shooting for our next documentary next week, actually, the first bout of interviews, and we are investigating the common phenomena of ghosts, but we're doing it from a soul smack aspect. I mean, we're coming at it from an angle I don't believe has been touched, and I can't reveal too much on it because I don't want anyone to run out there with their film crew and snatch our idea and concept. But we are going to turn the ghost hunting world upside down with some of the stuff we're going to come out with, and we are looking at it from an aspect that I don't believe has been touched. So people have got that to look forward to from us next, and we've got a string of documentaries from UFOs to consciousness. Again, everything will have a different spin on it. We're going to add the soul smack spin on everything we do, and it's going to be pretty interesting. And the concepts and ideas that we're coming out with are pretty fresh. So it'd be interesting to see how the general populace responds to what we're doing.
Okay, Andrew, do you have anything to add there?
Well, in addition to those documentaries, we're trying to make some room for some of the other people that have spoken to us, and we really haven't decided to take it on yet. So, but there are some into some lawyers who've come forward to express an interest in revealing some of the things that happened over the past 20 years down in Latin America, and being intentionally vague on that, but very serious, factual human rights perspective on that.
Oh, I was hoping for like a chupacabra angle.
What?
A chupacabra angle?
Well, we there'll be left for the UFO stuff when we bring those guys out. You know?
There you go.
But they're pretty interesting. All of this whole, and I want everyone out there who's listening to this show, start looking at the number of UFO sightings that are on the increase. Start looking at the number of government agencies that are opening their top secret files on UFO sightings. Even look at the Vatican in Rome that have said it's okay to believe in extraterrestrials. It's okay to believe in UFOs. There's a lot coming, and leading up to this 2012, everybody believes is the end of the world. Well, it's not the end of the world. It's a new beginning for us. It's a whole shift in vibrational frequency and consciousness that's coming. It's a new beginning for humanity, and watch out for the UFOs, because they are going to be the next biggest thing that's going to be coming out of every documentary filmmaker, and every news agency is going to start reporting more and more sightings until they finally stand up and say these things are real. The governments have already released them. The UK government has released their documents. You can go online, search UK UFO documents released. You can read them all. And the Americans, I believe, Obama and that administration are going to open the books on the United States classified documents.
Yeah, and I should add, as far as UFO abductions are concerned, we have interviews online and in the works with some of the major writers on the topic through our connections at Harvard University. We're very excited about those, and they should play out in the next film work that we do.
Nice. Sounds good. All right. Well, hey, it was great talking to you guys tonight. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of laughs, and we really delved into the sleep paralysis / supernatural assault realm that, as I said at the beginning, really exists on the peripheral of the esoteric world, but is getting bigger and bigger, you know, as the days and weeks and months and years go by. Over the last few years, it seems like sleep paralysis and this night terrors aspect of it, you know, you hear about the old hag story, which you kind of talked about earlier with the Haggard thing. You know, you kind of keep hearing it a little bit more and more every year. You hear a little bit more about what's going on here with these supernatural assaults. So it's great that you guys really shined a big spotlight on the topic. And as I said, the production values for Your Worst Nightmare were top notch. They were outstanding. And usually when I put on a paranormal film documentary, usually, you know, I'll watch like the first 5 minutes and then I'll go do something else and listen to it in the background because I just can't deal with watching these movies. But with your movie, I was just like riveted to the screen, and that wasn't just because Heather was on there. It was just because it was a fascinating film. So I highly recommend it. Definitely people should check it out. It's one of the best paranormal films I've seen in quite a while, and they can find out how to get it and all that good stuff at www.soulsmack.com. I'll spell that out for you for folks who can't really figure it out. It's soulsmack.com, soulsmack.com. Definitely check it out. Pick up Your Worst Nightmare, Supernatural Assault, awesome film, and keep an eye on the Soul Smack crew here, because it sounds like they're going to be putting out some amazing stuff over the next few years and onward, hopefully, into the future. So, just to wrap it all up, hey, thanks for coming on the show, Andrew, and thanks for coming on the show, Paul.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's enjoyable.
That does it for this week's edition of BOA Audio Season 4. Big thanks to Andrew Barnes and Paul Tate for coming on the show. You can find out more on their film, Your Worst Nightmare, Supernatural Assault, and their production company, Soulsmack, at the website www.soulsmack.com, soulsmack.com. Check it out. Moving right along now, we push forward into this week's installment of BOA Audio Listener Feedback. Plucked some of the guest suggestion emails from folks in the audience. Kicking things off, we go to our first emailer, Peter. And he is, yes, my friends, one of our favorite demographics of listeners here on the program, the international listeners, coming to us from the Netherlands. I believe he's the first person from the Netherlands to get in touch with us here on BOA Audio and at BOA. So thanks for writing in, Peter. Here's what he has to say. Great show you're having, Tim, and I appreciate the way your interviews are done. A couple of shows ago, you mentioned the more prominent place of the Bigfoot and Loch Ness enigmas in the 80s and early 90s. That brought back memories of me being a little kid in the late 80s and early 90s and watching shows like Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious Universe. The whole esoteric scene has changed indeed. I guess you're familiar with Joseph P. Farrell and his research into the Nazi occult and technology. The man has written some good books on the subject. Have you thought of having Farrell on the show, or are you currently trying to get an interview with him? Keep up the good work. All the best, Peter, hailing from the Netherlands. Once again, Peter, thank you for writing in. I love the international listeners. International listeners, if you're out there, write us. You get your email pushed to the top of the pile for almost immediate reading here on listener feedback, although I do have another international listener in the till that we'll get to next week. Regarding what you wrote in, first, quickly, let me touch on the strange case of the lost paranormal mysteries. Bigfoot is still a massive pillar of the esoteric community. I don't think that'll change anytime soon unless the Bigfoot is captured or killed. But let's face it, the Loch Ness, much of the luster around the Loch Ness Monster is quite dimmed here in 2009. As I wrote back to Peter, his email reminded me of another lost esoteric mystery that we barely ever hear about, and that's the Amelia Earhart disappearance. Back when I was a kid, it seemed like that was one of the hugest stories in all of the paranormal world. I can't even remember the last time I really heard any serious, solid information on the Amelia Earhart mystery. Something maybe that we'll explore here in the future on the program, if we can even dig up a contemporary Amelia Earhart expert. Regarding Joseph P. Farrell, I am very interested in his stuff. I haven't had a chance really to sit down and read his books, but I will definitely put him on the list. I find that it's always a balancing act when I'm picking guests for the show, because I have to invest so much time in reading their books that I just can't run out and book, no pun intended, 3 or 4 different guests who each have a 500-page book, because then I'm just going to be overwhelmed and not able to do all those interviews. That said, we do have a little mini break coming up at the end of April, which should give me a chance to read some more books, and when that happens, I'll definitely take a look at Farrell's stuff and try and figure out where I should begin with someone who has such a wide berth of tomes on a variety of different Nazi-related subjects. So we'll put Farrell on the list. He's definitely someone I'm interested in interviewing in the future, so stay tuned to BOA Audio. Chances are you will be hearing him on the program at some point. If not here at the end of Season 4, then definitely during Season 5 or 6. Oh, did I say that? I don't know yet. Let's just say at some point in the future. Thanks again for writing in, Peter, and congratulations to the Netherlands on their big win in the World Baseball Classic over the Dominican Republic. Second email this week, ironically enough, comes from another Peter. I didn't even notice that till just now when I looked at the list of emails that I chose. But it's a Peter Pumpkin Eater edition of listener feedback, I guess you could say. Here's our second email from Peter, no hometown listed, although presumably somewhere in New Mexico. Here's what he has to say. Please consider Mr. Norio Hayakawa as a guest this month if possible, or at least a quick mention. He's a very intelligent speaker. He is holding the world's first Dulce Underground Bass Conference in Dulce, New Mexico on March 29th, 2009. That would be this coming weekend. His website is www.myspace.com/Norio Hayakawa, NORIOHAYAKAWA. Best regards, Peter. Thanks for writing in, Peter. I appreciate that you wrote us with a guest request. Unfortunately, I won't be able to interview Mr. Hayakawa before the Dulce Underground Bass Conference. Is that how you pronounce it, Dulce? I think it is. Since it is this coming weekend, and we already have pretty much all the episodes here through the next 3 weeks taped and all set to run. But I will give a shout out here for his conference, the Dulce Underground Bass Conference in Dulce, New Mexico, March 29, 2009. Punch it in on Google, Dulce Underground Bass Conference, or Norio Hayakawa, and you'll find out more about him. Definitely want to attend that one, folks, if you're in the New Mexico area. These mom and pop conferences are dependent on the support of folks like you and me in the hardcore underground esoteric audience. We're the ones that keep a lot of these things from either losing their shirt or breaking even, and maybe even making a minor profit, although that's always doubtful when you're running a UFO conference. So if you're in the area, you got to check out the Dulce Underground Bass Conference. We'll keep it limited to 2 emails here this week in favor of time constraints and hoping to get the episode out to you here late on Monday night. Peter from the Netherlands and Peter, no hometown listed, thank you so much for writing in. Thank you for the guest suggestions. Both Joseph Farrell and Norio Hayakawa are on the list for future BOA audio interviews, I can assure you. If you'd like to be a part of BOA audio listener feedback, there's 3 ways to do it. Let me run them down quickly for you here. Either write to boaaudio@hotmail.com, or simply go to BOA and click the contact button. That'll put you on the email road. And the third option is to join up at the official BOA forum, theUSofE.com, THEUSOFE.com. If you're a big fan of contests, now's the time to join up at the forum. We're going to kick off 2 big prediction contests. The WrestleMania Pick'em Contest, that's going to be a short-term one, only lasts about a week. And then the big one, the 2009 Major League Baseball Prediction Contest, not only involving the members of the US of E, but involving the guests who appear on the 3rd annual BOA Audio Baseball Special, which we will have for you in about 2 weeks. So those are the 3 methods: email, go to the website, click contact, or join the forum, theUSofE.com. Any of those methods puts your correspondence into my hands for future editions of BOA Audio listener feedback. Up next, you know what comes here. It is the thanks portion of the show, the credits, if you will. Tip of the hat and thanks to the infamous and esteemed BOA staff: Leslie, Chiron, R. Lee, Joe V, Tina Senna, Rochelle Hawks, Richard Thomas, Paul Black, and Lasha Seniuk, producing top-notch reading material of the esoteric variety Monday through Friday at the BOA website. I am consistently delighted and amazed at the content that they produce for us at BOA, and I hope you are too. As we say week in and week out, Banal of America is not just an audio series. We are, of course, BOA Audio, as you can tell since you're listening to it, but we are also a daily stomping ground of esoteric opinion, courtesy of the fantastic BOA staff. So if you're only listening to the podcast series and you're not reading the columns, you're only getting half the story. BOA, make it a part of your everyday search for esoteric news and opinion. Before I beg you for donations, I gotta say thanks to all of the amazingly generous folks who have made donations so far here in 2009. Our donations have been really helpful so far here this year and remarkable in light of the troubling economic times we're living in. So thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart to all of the great folks who have been making donations to Banal of America in the last few months. It is hugely appreciated. But now we turn to the folks in the audience who would like to make a donation but maybe have been procrastinating for a little while. Of course, they're doing okay in the financial crunch. We don't want donations from people who can't get by, who are barely getting by week to week, month to month. Please don't make donations. Spend that money on things that are serious and important, like your family and your rent. But there are a lot of folks who are doing okay. They're in secure jobs and they're enjoying the program week in and week out. And maybe they want to make a donation, but they've been procrastinating. We ask those folks to take a little time here at the end of the program. Go to BOA, click the PayPal button, and make a donation. PayPal will walk you through the process. It's pretty simple. You can find our PayPal button on the home page or the BOA Audio Archive page. No donation is too small, and all donations go towards keeping BOA and BOA Audio freely available for all of our great readers and listeners the world over. Next week on the program, we're going to take a journey into the strange world of Kentucky's Anderson County, also known as the Fraser Land, with researcher Philip Spencer. Philip is the star of the DVD The Wild Man of Kentucky, Mystery of Panther Rock, and he's also the author of the book that inspired the film, also by the same title, Wild Man of Kentucky, Mystery of Panther Rock. He's been researching this bizarre area of Kentucky his whole life, and he's going to detail some of the truly strange sightings and events in Anderson County, notably the hotbed of activity around the site known as Panther Rock. We're going to find out about reports of Bigfoot in the area, including his own sighting. We're going to learn about the odd Fraser mud track. We'll ponder if there's a paranormal element at work in the area, a la Skinwalker Ranch. We'll hear the Fraser howl, which was recorded in Anderson County, of a very bizarre sound that may have come from some kind of cryptid. We're going to discuss stories of Wolfman and Big Cat sightings. We'll get Philip's take on the kill versus no-kill debate in Bigfoot research, and tons more very richly detailed, very character-driven episode. Philip is certainly someone you're not going to forget anytime soon. It's an episode that shines a spotlight on the esoteric hotbed that is Anderson County, Kentucky, with author and researcher Philip Spencer, a man who was born and raised in the paranormal crossroads that is the Fraser Land. That's next week on the program. Be there or be square, to be posted at BOA Sunday or Monday. Come on back for that one. And on that note, we wrap it up here for the week. Big thanks again to Andrew Barnes and Paul Tate for coming on the show. And, of course, a big, super huge thanks to all of the fantastic BOA Audio listeners. You are the fuel that drives the machine. I say it often because it's true. You are the folks who keep this program up and running with your support and donations and overall zeal for esoteric study. Thank you for tuning in once again. Thank you for making us a part of your esoteric audio playlist. Until next time, this is Tim Banal, signing off.